But they're totally different, because detachment is, it's having the mental and emotional bandwidth to process things as they happen, because you are not bound by your... Welcome to the ENSO podcast. This is a podcast for people engaging in the never-ending process of expansion and growth. The purpose of this podcast is to expand and grow through awareness, introspection, and stillness. We fundamentally understand that relative to all there is to know, we know relatively nothing. With this in mind, we will consider and reconsider interesting perspectives, ideologies, and strategies for the purpose of self-actualization. Josiah, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about attachment versus detachment.
Attachment versus detachment?
Yeah.
What the heck is that?
Well, actually, let me correct myself. Attachment and detachment.
It's a yes and situation,
yes,
isn't it?
Yes.
Excellent.
It is.
Excellent.
So, attachment, I'm just going to define it.
Please.
A deep emotional bond that connects one person to another across time and space.
Wow.
This bond can be seen in various forms, such as the attachment between parents and children, friends, or romantic partners. It involves feelings of affection, security, and dependence.
Wow. That sounds like a magical substance.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting dependence.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think we might have to dig into that at some point.
I can't wait to dig into that.
Mm.
And then detachment, the ability to maintain a sense of emotional independence, objectivity in relationships. It doesn't mean a lack of care or love, but rather the capacity to remain calm and composed, not overly influenced by emotions or the actions of others. Detachment can help in maintaining healthy boundaries and reducing stress in relationships.
Wow. That actually sounds really helpful. I thought that the definition was going to have some degree of, steely coldness.
Yeah.
And unfeeling feelings.
I agree. That isn't how I see detachment. I kind of see detachment this way, but I think that's how detachment is perceived.
Commonly viewed.
Yes. Yeah. Whenever you're the other person on that other side, right? So, other relationship. Yeah.
I'm thinking in terms of perspective, right? Because I think it's fun to play with the frame of reference a little bit around these concepts. How it might feel to be in an attached relationship, a highly attached relationship, how it might feel instead to be in a detached relationship, and how other people might view that. What does it look like in first person, and what might it look like from outside the box, to other people? Right. How might that come across? I feel like there's some really interesting parallels that we can draw here, and we have the opportunity to do, I think, maybe one of our favorite things to do on this podcast, which is investigate, examine some assumptions that we oftentimes like to make. Why? Because we're human beings. We are little assumption machines.
We are a little assumption. We are attached, dependent on our assumptions in a lot of ways.
Oftentimes, that's how it shakes out. Yeah. So, in this podcast, we will not be sharing a guide to to any of this stuff. We're just going to talk about it. We're going to explore and have a free-form conversation about it. So,
good.
So that's how we like to do things here. But to start our conversation off, I want to pull on Freud's 3 pillars of life. And those for those who don't know, this is love, work, and play. And I didn't look this up or fact check this before the show, so if it's wrong, just please excuse my my error.
Don't write in.
Right? Yeah, don't do that. But anyways, I think that the obvious starting place is love. And this is, of course, if you wanted to share anything else about perspective around attachment or detachment, I'd love to hear that. But
Oh, I will. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Makes sense.
go for it.
During.
Oh, of course. Throughout the course of our 3 pillars conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, naturally.
So, Freud's, what do we call that again?
3 pillars.
3
of
pillars.
life. Let me fact check myself really quick and see. So I could be wrong, honestly.
So while you're fact checking, and then I can correct myself if your facts are
Yes.
off, but I think they're probably gonna be spot on.
I hope so. It's been a lot of years in, College of Psychology.
Yeah.
We both
for
have,
sure.
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So love, right? So I think this is actually really cool to look at attachment and detachment. And I say and because, you can have a person who has more of a attached style and a person who has more of a detached style. So what that composition is, you never know. And then also I think it is possible to have a person or, maybe the individuals evolve over time.
Ooh.
Right, where they display or manifest attributes of both.
Absolutely.
Or maybe not even time, but the condition, right? So
yeah,
like
circumstance.
Yeah, circumstance or condition or scenario or whatever it is. Will
Context.
Context, right. It will bring out, certain attributes. But I think when I was reading Detachment, there was a distinction between, how a person behaves and what it actually means with respect to care and love. So
Right.
It said, it doesn't mean that they don't care and love. It just means that they're not emotionally swayed, or they are what some research would say is neutral thinking.
Neutral
Right.
thinking.
Yeah. Do you know what that is?
Like definition-wise, technical definition, definitely not. But I have an idea. I'm really curious.
So neutral thinking, right? A concept polarized by late coach and author Trevor Moawad. I believe I got that correct.
Not sure.
In which, and now this has a lot to do with sports, but it really has more to do with the relationship, in my opinion, and I'll read this, but the relationship between a person and their environment or their attachment to a particular person or thing.
Right.
Right. So the way this is framed, though, talking about sports, basically a recovering athlete, right, who has had an injury and they really love this sport and they played it their whole life and they had an injury. They don't get too low or high, but they focus on the facts, the hard facts. If the situation and the incremental progress that they need to make to get back to the sport or to get back to whatever that thing is that they're still attached to, but they have been relegated to a
Right.
detached phase,
Right.
where they can no longer participate the way that they want to. So it's all about helping people be present in the moment and removing the emotional aspect. And that's when I was reading the detached definition. They make that distinction where they say it doesn't mean a lack of care or love, but rather a capacity to remain calm and composed, not overly influenced by emotions or the actions of others. And I think relative to love, right, to me, that is like the most authentic form of love. When you can be non-emotional or not influenced by that circumstance,
Right.
and really not become myopic,
Right.
but think longer term about your commitment. You can remain calm and composed. I think that's what this is saying or depicting, and that's why I think when we're talking about love, I think the healthier style is more detached.
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about how many marriages have failed due to a lack of, this concept that we're talking about right now, detachment.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to say some really hurtful things when we're feeling particularly hurt.
In the moment, yeah.
And I remember this was something that my mom shared with me when I was little. But she would say that words are like our speech. It's like a feather pillow. Mm-hmm. And when we choose to like break open the pillow lining and let the feathers out, let all of our words out, all of our feelings, all of our emotions, whatever is, sitting with us in that present moment, we can't ever put them back in. The wind is going to take those, and that feather is going to travel many, many miles and reach strange new lands, and it's not a worthy goal to put it back in.
Yeah.
And I think like that is what happens when we get really, really upset and we just let it all out. We have no idea what the butterfly effect is going to be from, those feathers riding the trade winds and making their way to new destinations. Could they carry disease to some, unsuspecting population? They absolutely could. Could your words plant a seed inside your partner's mind that absolutely just erodes their sense of trust with you, that withers away their sense of worth and identity that they may have rightly, wrongly, mistakenly, strategically built upon you and your relationship?
Right.
Because what is a relationship but an agreement between two people? Rarely documented, right?
Right.
We don't have a friendship agreement between us, right? But we have unspoken rules that we tend to follow. Yeah. And we have some heart share and some mind share around that. Mm-hmm. But I think, strategically also, we haven't placed our value or our identities upon one another. Mm-hmm. That would be a lot of responsibility. And that, just to tie a bow on this, make it pretty, that seems to me like what attachment is that dependence, to bring it full circle. Are you tracking with this?
I am. I'm tracking that. Attachment. It's funny that you use like the last word that's used in the definition, right? Dependence. And I think in detachment, there's still dependence, but there is interdependence.
Yes.
Right. There is not crossing, but there's a cross-referencing of context of goals or values.
Right.
Right. An intersectionality.
A commingling.
Yeah. But then there's still independent growth. Right.
Right. We've talked about this a lot in the context of relationships, these spheres of expansion.
Right.
Right. And how do we maximize both our individual and our collective expansion?
Right. And I think with respect to love, okay, you cannot have the interdependence that detachment requires without self-love.
Wow. An important factor for us to discuss, right? It's so easy to put the cart before the horse, get ahead of ourselves. But that's been honestly one of the things that I found myself focusing on the most over the past year. And Josiah is in the loop on this more so than perhaps our listeners, but I'm getting married here very, very soon.
Very soon.
And I grew up in a home with two incredible, loving, beautiful, wonderful parents that could not figure out how to make it work together, right? And they separated, and I had the tremendous blessing of inheriting two step parents.
Yep.
And I got to benefit from their influence in my life, and I also got to witness their marriages with my biological parents and see, what I don't think anyone would call their marriages easy marriages, or even, I don't want to comment.
Perfect.
Definitely not perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Save me right there. In case my parents end up listening to this at some point.
They will. They might. They're fans.
Right.
Go ahead.
Just to bring that full circle, I've realized that, so one of the major goals in my life, and I shared that the context, the background, to deepen the level of understanding here, but I would really like to have a healthy, connected, and fruitful marriage. That is just, I think it has so many other consequences, and in and of itself, just in a vacuum, that can be such a source of love and meaning. It's the substance of life. Right. It's in my mind. It's a big part of what we're here to do, to love one another. So, with that being said, how can I prepare myself to show up in this relationship in a way that I'm proud of? Right. Because, I pride myself on choosing the right people. Right. When it comes to my friends, it's literally, we built a business off this concept that if you can choose the right people, the rest of your life will be so much easier. And case in point, let's show you what happens when you choose the wrong person, And so in the context of marriage, choosing the right person is incredibly important. And I put a lot of time and energy into figuring out what was important to me. And, what makes Rachel a fit or not a fit for me in the greater, appreciation of like a lifetime. And I feel, really good about that choice. That I feel like we got that piece of the puzzle right. But that's only half the battle.
Right.
The other half of the battle is showing up and doing the work. And I think what I've uncovered is that the most productive use of my time is not necessarily, it's not external, it's internal, because the internal informs the external. So developing that loving relationship just internally, learning to kind of, try to befriend myself, as weird as that sounds.
Right. That's
been super formative. What is your experience with it? I'm really interested to hear about that, if you're willing to share. No pressure.
Of course I'm willing to share, right? So the ability to maintain a sense of emotional independence and objectivity in relationships. Another word for that would just be grace. And I think it is very easy to become emotionally independent or maintain a sense of emotional independence or objectivity in a relationship, particularly a marriage, if you can see the parts that you despise, you hate in that other person, if you can see them in yourself first.
Wow.
Because then you are much more likely to say, you know what, I can see myself behaving that way, even though I haven't. There must be a condition that I'm a participant of, or I facilitated in some way, that is allowing this person to behave in a manner that I don't appreciate.
Right.
One, what is my part in that, and where do I see that in myself? And if I don't see it in myself, then that means I'm probably facilitating it in some way. So how do I then stop participating in that manner?
I wonder how you actually do that.
Well, that's like you said, the other 50% of the work is showing up to do the work.
Right.
Right. Like the work in a lot of ways is just kind of understanding, ourselves, understanding. Like we had a episode or session earlier in the season where we talked about how you bring in marriage, your experience of marriage, into marriage. You bring in your experience of love to the love that you choose. It's all the other stuff that you didn't choose, the stuff that you witnessed, that you were party to in some way, that was not your fault, but it still lives in your body.
Yeah.
It still lives in your mind. And it is trying to protect you from a situation that is no longer applicable.
Right.
And at best, what it does, not saying this is even positive, but it just recreates that scenario.
Right.
Different time in life, different time on the globe, same scenario.
Same pain.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think parsing what is yours and what is the other person's, seeing that you could easily be on the other side of that equation.
Yeah.
And then, understanding that there may be some things that you are responsible for. Not that it's your fault.
Right.
But there's some things that you could help identify by being a little bit more vulnerable about your experience.
Right. You touched on so many powerful things there. We could dig into the difference between fault and responsibility, because that's a big one. And then also you're reminding me of a conversation that we had a long time ago where we talked about our partners being a mirror, a reflection, oftentimes of the things that we've been trying to avoid inside.
Yeah.
They have this uncanny ability to bring that out and bring it to the surface, cause us to face it.
Avoid, yes, and maybe conditions that we have, they present a condition that we have never actually been in before, right? So, if I've been by myself for years, and I get married, or have a long-term relationship, and this person or this condition, when we go somewhere, something happens, this person gets upset, or my partner gets upset, and then I see a different side of them, or I see a different side of myself. That was always there.
Right.
I just was never in the condition, to see it manifest. And so, one, that's something to be grateful for, because wow, I got to see a different side of myself,
Right.
that I didn't know was there. And we do that when positive things happen.
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't know I could do that.
I didn't know I could do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I definitely think, a long-term committed partnership does that. It allows us to see that, man, we actually have some plasticity, emotional awareness and plasticity that we didn't necessarily have or think we had.
Right.
Tolerance, right?
Right. We just weren't aware of it.
We weren't aware, yeah. But then also, like I said, when it doesn't go well and we are triggered just by something that really, like the detachment style here, right? We're not able to remain calm and composed.
Yeah.
We're influenced by the emotions or actions of the other.
We freak out.
Yeah.
Lose it.
Yeah.
So I'm so curious. I think it could be worthwhile to explore in the context of love. detachment versus repression. I think perhaps before tuning into this podcast, people might have some degree of overlap in their minds between those two things, when they're actually, especially after learning more about detachment, they're quite different.
Yeah.
Because in my understanding, repression is the ultimate avoidance, or maybe compartmentalization. Like, I am going to store this in an area where it's not in my way, like kind of our mental filing system, and then just ignore it, and ignore the reminders until eventually, as we know happens, with any repression situation, it will eventually surface. We can't, that's a short-term strategy, right? It's not a long-term strategy, repression. But they're totally different, because detachment it's having the mental and emotional bandwidth to process things as they happen, because you are not bound by your emotions.
You took it right out of my brain. Yes, I think the key here is, we talk about interdependence, right? We talk about two circles, they are intersecting. It's a podcast, so we don't have visual. I'm just going to do my best. But they're intersecting, right? And imagine if those two circles are rotating, right? There's a momentum that's created.
Yeah.
And at any point, right, or any spot on the circle that's rotating, imagine if that is like time, where we're going through something, or we need to learn something, right? And it's an inflection point.
Right.
And at that point, we can either expand or contract.
Right.
And one partner learns really fast from events. And the other partner does not.
Right. They choose the left fork as opposed to the right fork, or whatever. Yeah.
And one partner expands, right? And they're no longer dealing with the same triggers.
Right.
But the other partner doesn't do that as well. And I think the one thing that allows the one partner to expand and to not deal with the triggers so much is their ability to observe themselves.
Yeah.
Right? And process the emotion, because there's always an emotion.
Always.
And that is the difference between detached, right? Where you process the emotion, but it is so fast that it doesn't even look like you're processing it.
It might appear to be compartmentalization
or repression, but it's not.
Repression,
right.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I would say the attachment is really more repression. The person says, I'm not going to even explore this emotion or the trigger that I have around it because I don't want to upset this other person that I'm dependent upon.
Right. Ooh, this is good, because the posture of attachment, it's a tight grip.
It is a tight grip, but it doesn't appear that way.
It doesn't.
It doesn't always appear that way.
How does it appear?
So yes, it does appear how you're characterizing it.
Right.
But I think it is often mistaken, the dependence piece, right? The security piece. It's typically, like I said, where a person will frame it as, I need this person, right? Where they haven't really worked out the context.
They haven't done the calculus.
Yeah.
And so that they just assume that I have them now, so I can't lose them. Yeah.
There you go. It is a fear of loss.
Right.
That's there. And I'm not painting a doom and gloom picture here. I'm just saying, when someone can really evaluate, like, where does that come from? What did I lose in my life that is, or who, or what relationship, or what did I witness? What did I experience? What loss did I experience that makes me frame dependence or codependence in my relationships.
Right. Ooh, I love that. It makes me think of how, we know from an evolutionary perspective that the brain has evolved in layers, right? So we have there's some psychologists talk about the triune brain. We have kind of like the reptilian brain, the mammalian brain, and then this the neocortex, right? Everything that happened after that leads to our ability to, use executive function and all that good stuff. However, when we're building our identity, I think it follows a similar course of events. We have these foundational, the fundamentals. So these formative experiences that happen when we are at our most naive and are least able to think critically. We quite literally, the critical thinking portions of our brain have not developed. They're still in their infancy. So whenever we have an event that triggers us, and it's kind of like an outsized reaction, it's irrational, right? We feel, and you probably know this feeling too. It's like, I shouldn't feel this way. Why do I feel this way? But it is tugging on a thread that's connected to something much deeper, perhaps a trauma that happened in that formative space and time, and it's coded into our physiology, into our brain chemistry. And, as painful as it might be, I think there's tremendous benefit in following that thread to its foundation. And obviously I recommend doing this with a trained therapist if you can, right?
Yeah, somebody knows what they're doing.
However, don't be afraid of it, right? There's value to the exploration.
I'll read the first sentence of Attachment. A deep emotional bond that connects one person to another across time and space.
Wow.
So the deep emotional bond, scratch connects one person to another. Let's move that,
okay.
Right? Remove that. Deep emotional bond across space and time, right? So that's what you're talking about. That's what trauma does.
Right.
It creates a deep emotional bond with something or someone, but typically it is a circumstance, right, or a condition across time and space, right?
Definitely.
And so, to your point, if we don't tug that thread, then it's much more likely that we're going to be triggered by something. We're going to be overly emotional. We're not going to be able to, look at a particular situation in a relationship or that involves a connection with another person with a sense of emotional independence and objectivity from that traumatic experience. It's not the other person. Right. It is the traumatic context that has the deep emotional bond or creates a deep emotional bond across space and time. It is literally, I'll calm down and decompose.
Detach. Okay.
But it is a connection to ourselves. That is the other person.
Right.
Our past self. How do we pull those strings and reference our past experience, a version of ourselves that we used to be, that was then split off by an event, traumatic or not, right? I'm talking to all 27 years of you, and the thing is, I can't parse between the pillow statement your mom made or the last argument you heard with your parents before they split up. I can't parse that. Right. I don't know what is influencing you, and it's much more likely that you don't know. Yeah. Right? You haven't made that distinction.
Oh, definitely not.
Same with me, right? You're not just talking to, me from yesterday. You're talking to all 36 years, right? And you have no idea if it's, if what's coming out of my mouth is influenced 80% by, my grandmother picking on me, right, at 11, right, or my mom laying in the bed reading to me, at 6. We don't know, right? And so I think that's kind of where, if we've done at least some work around our own experiences, and we can see ourselves throughout time, and we're able to, become detached in some way, look at ourselves throughout time, then it's much more likely that we'll say, man, I have no idea who I'm talking to.
Right.
But I know I'm talking to an aggregation of experiences. Right? And that, to me, when we're talking about love, and maybe we won't even get to the other two.
Won't.
But that is, to me, that is like one of the best ways to love, is like to admit that we have no freaking clue, and to be so curious to want to tug at those strings, right? Not be therapists, but just be partner and be like, want to really understand a person, based on every single event that they're aware of.
Right. And what a gift to be truly understood like that. You know? We that's a gift we can give ourselves also. So
yes, first ourselves.
Yeah.
First ourselves, looking at our own events. Yeah.
All right. I'm going to wrap up here with a quote and then just some closing thoughts. Definitely give you the opportunity to share any closing thoughts as well. Here's the quote. True detachment. Oh, it's so funny. I think we may have misattributed the the quote. Anyways, here's the quote we have for you all today. True detachment isn't about separation from life, but about engaging in life without being bound by its outcomes.
Right.
And this, we really do believe, is Jack Kornfield. We might just attribute all future quotes in this podcast to Jack Kornfield. God rest his soul. If he's still alive, I apologize.
Right. Well, I agree. I think that's kind of where the insight we were coming to is really just that, well, we don't know the outcome. We don't know how this person, our partner, right, a long-term partner, will respond with our curiosity to understand them.
Right.
But it is much more likely that they will be grateful for the process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Especially if we express some intention in there too.
Yes.
Right. So the closing thought that I would like to share and end on is that I've been thinking about this lately. Emotions are kind of similar to jet fuel, like just high octane, easily combustible fluid, substance, whatever. And they can absolutely destroy us, or we can leverage them, can harness their creative power to really take us places, and to share with people. I mean, how productive for a relationship can it be for you to share genuine emotion? But again, it can also be used to their detriment. So I don't know. I think that's powerful and worth reflecting on. And I think that this principle of detachment can help us harness emotions for the better.
I agree. It's something called time dilation.
Time dilation.
Yeah, where you essentially change the way something is observed by your behavior, or changing the characteristics around it.
Catch our next podcast on time dilation. For sure. All right. That's a wrap.
Yeah.
Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next time.
The Enzo Podcast is brought to you by Vulcan Capital and New Holdings. You can find the Enzo Podcast on
on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Music. The song Full Bloom by Yule and Noemina. You can find them wherever you listen to your music.